The desert highway stretched endlessly into the dark, a thin ribbon of asphalt carved through an ocean of sand and scrub. The sky above was a canvas of stars, each one winking with cold indifference, as if mocking Ray Harlow's decision to take the scenic route. The road was supposed to be a shortcut, but instead it felt like he'd stumbled into the middle of nowhere, and nowhere was in no hurry to let him leave. His car, a clunky old sedan affectionately named Beetlejuice after its paint job, a mottled black and white pattern that looked like a cow had tried cosplay, grumbled beneath him. The engine emitted a sound that was part growl, part wheeze, as if it too was questioning the wisdom of this journey. Ray adjusted the cracked rearview mirror, not because he cared about what was behind him, but because it gave him something to do. The mirror reflected the same emptiness he saw ahead. No headlights, no taillights, just him and the relentless road. He sighed, reaching for the ancient radio knob, knowing full well the thing hadn't worked in years. That's when the static started. It was faint at first, like the distant hum of cicadas on a hot summer night. Ray froze, his hand hovering over the knob. The noise crackled, popped, and then shifted into something stranger, a rhythm, almost melodic, but alien in its cadence. Great, Ray muttered. Now I'm hearing things. Next stop, paranoid delusions and talking to cacti. The static morphed again, this time into a voice. Female. Urgent. It spoke in a language he couldn't place, the syllables sharp and fluid, like water over broken glass. It wasn't the sound that unnerved him, it was the tone. Whoever this was, she sounded desperate. Hello? Ray said, because talking to a potentially broken radio seemed like the least crazy option. The voice didn't respond, but the urgency in her tone escalated, and Ray swore he could feel the fear radiating through the static. He shook his head and laughed nervously. Right. Alien distress signals. Classic desert horror setup. All I'm missing is a tumbleweed rolling by and a coyote howling in the distance. He tried to convince himself it was just interference, maybe a stray broadcast from a distant station, but the voice was too deliberate, too real. As he argued with his own logic, a figure appeared in the distance, barely visible in the weak glow of his headlights. At first, it looked like a mirage, shimmering on the horizon, but as Ray's car drew closer, the figure solidified. It was a woman, or at least it looked like one. She was running, her movements frantic and uneven, as if the act of fleeing had drained every ounce of strength she had left. Ray's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Okay, so this is how horror movies start. The hero stops to help and boom, alien abduction or serial killer ambush. He laughed nervously. Good thing I'm not a hero. Despite his self-deprecating humor, Ray slowed the car, his headlights fully illuminating her. The first thing he noticed was her skin, a soft, glowing blue that pulsed faintly, like bioluminescent algae. Her hair, or what he assumed was hair, shimmered with threads of silver and gold, moving slightly as though caught in an unseen breeze. She turned her head and their eyes met. Hers were luminous, a swirling mix of green and gold, wide with fear and pleading. Whoa, Ray whispered, his earlier quips dying on his lips. The woman, no, the alien, staggered, and for a moment it looked like she might collapse. Instead, she pushed herself harder, her legs moving with a determination that defied her exhaustion. She glanced behind her and Ray followed her gaze, but the darkness revealed nothing. Still, her fear was contagious. Ray hesitated, his foot hovering over the brake. What am I supposed to do? Pull over and offer her a ride? What if she eats humans for breakfast, or lays eggs in my car, or... His internal debate ended abruptly when the alien stumbled and fell, her glowing form crumpling to the ground like a dying star. Ray cursed under his breath and pulled over, parking Beetlejuice at an awkward angle. As he stepped out, the desert night hit him like a wall, cold, silent, and oppressive. The only sound was the faint hum of his car's engine and the crunch of gravel under his boots. He approached her cautiously, holding his hands up in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. Hey, are you okay? Need a ride? Or a translator, maybe? She looked up at him, her luminous eyes brimming with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Her lips moved, but the sounds that came out were incomprehensible, layered with urgency. Ray scratched the back of his head. Yeah, I don't speak, whatever that is. But I've got a half-empty water bottle and some chips in the car if that helps. To his surprise, she seemed to understand the word water. Her hand reached out weakly, and Ray took that as a cue to run back to the car. He grabbed the water bottle and the chips, returning to find her sitting up, her glowing skin dimmer now, as though exhaustion was sapping her light. He handed her the bottle and she drank greedily, her movements clumsy but efficient. The chips were next, and she tore into the bag with an enthusiasm that made him chuckle. Well, at least we have chips in common, he said, sitting down beside her on the cool desert ground. So, what are you running from? She pointed to the sky, her glowing hand trembling. Ray followed her gaze, but all he saw were stars. Right. Sky monsters. Fantastic. Should have stayed home and watched Netflix. The alien woman didn't laugh, probably didn't understand him, but her shoulders relaxed slightly, the fear in her eyes replaced by something else. Trust, maybe. Ray sighed. Okay, Blue, here's the deal. I don't know what's after you, but I'm pretty sure I don't want to meet it. So, let's get you somewhere safe before the next episode of Alien Hunters starts. She didn't answer, but when he gestured toward the car, she stood, wobbling slightly before following him. As they climbed into Beetlejuice and drove off into the night, Ray couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a very, very weird turn. Guess I'm the sidekick in this one, he muttered, glancing at his glowing passenger. Hope you brought a good script, Blue. The radio crackled again, but this time, Ray didn't bother turning it off. He had a feeling this was only the beginning. The highway stretched endlessly before them, its cracked surface glinting faintly under the moonlight. Ray kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other drumming an offbeat rhythm on the dashboard. Beside him, the alien woman, whom he had mentally nicknamed Blue, sat rigid, her glowing hands gripping the edge of the seat, as if the car might suddenly eject her into the void. Ray glanced at her, his brows furrowing. You know, you could try looking a little less terrified. I mean, I'm not that bad of a driver. Blue turned her luminous green-gold eyes toward him, her expression blank but somehow accusatory. Okay, fine, Ray muttered, squinting at the road ahead. The car doesn't have airbags, and yeah, the brakes squeal like a banshee, but it's gotten me this far. Mostly. A sudden burst of static from the radio interrupted his rambling. Blue flinched, her glow flickering as her head whipped toward the dashboard. The sound shifted, morphing into the strange, rhythmic melody that had haunted him earlier. Oh, great. It's back, Ray muttered, reaching for the knob to turn it off. Before he could, Blue lunged forward, her movements startlingly fast. Her fingers, glowing faintly, hovered over the radio. The static cut off abruptly, replaced by a low hum that resonated through the car. Ray raised an eyebrow. What, you fixed it? That radio's been broken since I bought this junker. Blue didn't respond. Instead, she stared intently at the radio, her glow intensifying. The hum grew louder, more complex, as though it were speaking a language Ray couldn't begin to understand. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. If that thing starts telling me to take you to some secret alien base, I'm out, Ray joked, though his grip on the wheel tightened. Blue shot him a sharp look, her expression a mixture of frustration and, was that amusement? She made a series of gestures, pointing first to the radio, then to the sky, and finally to herself. Ray frowned. Wait, let me guess. That's your tracking beacon? No, you're jamming their signal or something? She nodded, her glow pulsing brighter. Ray blinked. Huh. Okay then. Good job, I guess. But just so you know, this does not count as fixing the radio. Blue's lips twitched upward in what might have been the faintest hint of a smile. Their brief moment of levity was interrupted by a flash of light in the rearview mirror. Ray stiffened, his gaze snapping to the reflective surface. In the distance, a cluster of lights danced erratically, too fast and too synchronized to belong to any human vehicle. Please tell me that's just some UFO enthusiasts with fancy drones, Ray said, his voice tinged with nervous humor. Blue didn't need to answer. Her glow dimmed again, and her posture grew tense, her fingers gripping the dashboard like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. Ray's heart began to race. Okay, Blue, new plan. We're gonna speed up and hope this old bucket of bolts doesn't fall apart. Hang tight. He slammed his foot on the gas, and Beetlejuice roared in protest before reluctantly surging forward. The car rattled and shook as it picked up speed, the loose cup holder clattering loudly against the console. Hold together, Beetlejuice, Ray shouted, gripping the wheel as the highway blurred beneath them. The lights behind them grew brighter, their erratic movements growing more ominous. Blue turned in her seat, her glowing eyes wide with fear. She made a series of frantic gestures, pointing to the lights and then to the sky. Ray risked a glance at her. What? You want me to fly this thing? Hate to break it to you, but Beetlejuice isn't exactly spaceship material. Blue groaned, her frustration evident. She reached into a pouch strapped to her waist and pulled out a small cylindrical device. The object emitted a faint hum, its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and shimmer in the dim light. Ray frowned. What's that? Some kind of alien flashlight? Please tell me it's not a bomb. Blue ignored him, pressing the device against the car's dashboard. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the entire vehicle shuddered, and a translucent field of light enveloped them. Whoa, 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 what did you just do? Ray shouted, his voice rising in pitch. Blue pointed to the field, and then to the rearview mirror, where the pursuing lights suddenly hesitated, their erratic movements slowing. Wait, you're telling me that thing made us invisible? Or undetectable? Whatever, I don't care. Just keep it going, Ray said, his earlier panic giving way to a mix of relief and awe. The lights eventually veered off, their erratic patterns fading into the distance. The tension in the car eased, though Ray's grip on the wheel remained white-knuckled. He let out a shaky laugh. Okay, that was intense. I mean, I've had bad road trips before, but this one's definitely taking the top spot. Blue's glow brightened slightly, and she glanced at him with what could only be described as gratitude. Ray exhaled deeply, his hands finally relaxing on the wheel. So, Blue, any chance you've got more of those gadgets? You know, for future crazy alien chases? Blue tilted her head, her expression unreadable, before tucking the device back into her pouch. Yeah, didn't think so, Ray muttered, a wry smile tugging at his lips. They drove in silence for a while, the hum of the engine filling the void. Despite the lingering tension, Ray couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with his glowing passenger. So, he said finally, glancing at her, you think maybe you could teach me some alien words? 'Cause if we're gonna keep this up, I'd really like to know how to say "don't panic" in your language. Blue blinked at him, her lips parting slightly as though considering the request. Then, to Ray's surprise, she made a sound, a soft melodic syllable that seemed to hang in the air like a song. Ray grinned. Okay, I have no idea what that means, but it sounds pretty cool. I'll take it. For the first time since their bizarre journey began, Blue smiled, a real, unmistakable smile. And for a moment, as the desolate highway stretched endlessly before them, the night didn't feel quite so cold. The dawn crept up reluctantly, painting the desert in muted tones of orange and gold. Ray squinted at the horizon, the road ahead shimmering like a mirage. He was exhausted. After the high-speed chase, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving him with a mix of fatigue and an overwhelming sense of what the hell is going on. Beside him, Blue, still glowing faintly, though the light had dimmed to a soft teal, sat cross-legged in the passenger seat. She was fiddling with the alien device she'd used to cloak the car, her long, dexterous fingers moving with practiced precision. Do you ever, stop glowing? Ray asked, breaking the silence. Not that it's not a nice glow, very mood-lighting, But like, do you have a dimmer switch or something? Blue glanced at him, her expression hovering between exasperation and amusement. She held up her glowing hand and then closed it into a fist. The light flickered off, leaving her looking almost human, except for her shimmering metallic hair and those unnervingly luminous eyes. Ray blinked. Okay, that's actually kinda cool. Creepy, but cool. Can you do party tricks with it? Maybe spell out help, I'm being chased by space jerks in Morse code? Blue tilted her head, her lips quirking upward in a way that suggested she found him funny, even if she didn't fully understand his words. Ray grinned. I'll take that as a yes. Now about those space jerks, any chance you're gonna fill me in on who they are? Or are we just playing a game of cosmic hide-and-seek until I run out of gas? Blue sighed, an entirely human gesture, and reached into her pouch. She pulled out a second device, this one flat and rectangular, with a screen that shimmered like liquid metal. She tapped it a few times, and an image appeared, a sleek, angular ship hovering ominously over what looked like a city. The ship bristled with weapons, its surface etched with glowing lines that pulsed like veins. Okay, Ray said slowly, his humor evaporating. That doesn't look friendly. Who are they? Space pirates? Intergalactic tax collectors? Or, wait, are they, your exes? Blue shot him a sharp look, her glow flaring briefly in what Ray decided to interpret as indignation. She tapped the screen again, and the image shifted to a symbol, a jagged triangle surrounded by smaller circles. Ray frowned. Yeah, that clears it up. Thanks for the visual aid, Blue. She sighed again and gestured at herself, then at the symbol, and finally at the sky. Ray squinted, piecing it together. Okay, so they're after you. Because of who you are, or something you have? Blue hesitated, then pointed to her pouch. Ray's eyes widened. Oh, great. You're carrying the alien equivalent of nuclear codes, aren't you? Or I don't know, some kind of galactic MacGuffin. Blue didn't confirm or deny, but the way she clutched the pouch tighter told Ray he wasn't far off. Awesome, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. I'm driving around with ET's most wanted. No big deal, totally fine. As if to underscore his point, the radio crackled to life again, spitting out more of that strange alien melody. Blue stiffened, her glow intensifying as she stared at the dashboard. Please tell me that's just a coincidence, Ray said, though he already knew it wasn't. Blue shook her head and gestured for him to pull over. Ray groaned. Oh, come on. We just lost them. You want me to stop now? She nodded emphatically, pointing to a cluster of rocks on the side of the road. Fine, Ray grumbled, steering Beetlejuice off the highway. But if this ends with me getting probed by space cops, I'm blaming you. Blue didn't seem to appreciate the joke, her focus entirely on the device in her hands. She tapped it rapidly, and the air around them seemed to shimmer, the faint hum of the cloaking field returning. Ray leaned back in his seat, watching as the desert around them blurred and distorted, the car disappearing into the landscape. Okay, that's pretty nifty. Can you do that for my credit card debt? Blue ignored him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Minutes passed in tense silence, the only sounds the occasional chirp of a bird and the faint rustle of wind through the scrub. Ray's nerves were fraying. So, he said, desperate to lighten the mood, you got a name? Or should I just keep calling you Blue? She glanced at him, her brows furrowing slightly. Blue it is, Ray said with a grin, unless you want to write it down or something. I mean, assuming your name isn't, unpronounceable. No offense, but if it's just a bunch of clicks and whistles, I'm gonna butcher it. Blue rolled her eyes, an unmistakably human gesture, and reached for the rectangular device. She tapped it a few times, and the screen displayed a series of symbols that looked vaguely like a constellation. Ray squinted. Okay, that's pretty, but I can't read star charts. Can I just call you Stella? You know, like stars? Blue considered this for a moment, then nodded. Great, Ray said, a small sense of victory creeping into his tone. Nice to officially meet you, Stella. I'm Ray. Not as fancy, but it gets the job done." Stella's lips twitched again in that almost smile, and for a brief moment, the tension between them eased. That moment was shattered by a distant rumble, low and menacing. Stella's glow flared, and she gestured urgently for Ray to stay quiet. He froze, his breath catching as the rumble grew louder, closer. It wasn't a car, it was something bigger, something mechanical. Peering through the shimmering field, Ray spotted it, a massive, hovering craft, its sleek surface glinting in the morning light. It moved with eerie precision, scanning the desert with beams of light that cut through the haze. Ray's heart pounded. "Please tell me they can't see us," he whispered. Stella shook her head, her glowing hand tightening around the device. The craft lingered for what felt like an eternity before finally veering off, its rumble fading into the distance. Ray exhaled shakily. "Okay, new rule. No more pulling over unless it's for snacks." Stella didn't laugh, but the way her glow softened told Ray she appreciated the attempt. He started the car, the hum of the cloaking field blending with Beetlejuice's wheezing engine as they pulled back onto the highway. "Let's just hope your little gizmo holds up," Ray said, glancing at her. "Because I'm fresh out of ideas and patience." Stella's gaze remained fixed on the road ahead, her expression unreadable. Ray sighed. "Yeah, I didn't think you had a plan either." As the miles stretched on, Ray couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get a lot more complicated, and a lot weirder. But for now, he was just grateful they were still alive. The open road unfolded like an ancient ribbon, jagged and frayed at the edges. Ray could feel Beetlejuice's engine wheezing with every mile. The fuel gauge hovered dangerously close to E, and the distant hum of pursuing alien ships wasn't something he wanted to think about for too long. "We've got about 10 miles left before this car officially becomes a paperweight," Ray muttered, mostly to himself. Stella glanced at him from the passenger seat, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. She gestured toward the dashboard, where the needle quivered like a nervous bird. "Yeah, I know," Ray said. "Human cars need gas to run, and no offense, but unless you can conjure up a cosmic fuel station, we're in trouble." Stella tilted her head, clearly pondering his words. With a faint shrug, she pulled out her rectangular device, its screen shimmering to life. Ray stole a glance and saw a pulsating map of the surrounding area, strange symbols flickering over what he assumed were key points of interest. "Is that a GPS?" Ray asked, his curiosity piqued. "Wait, don't tell me you've been holding out on me this whole time. You could have told me where we were going, and we could have skipped the whole driving aimlessly into doom thing." Stella gave him a pointed look, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. She tapped the screen, zooming in on a blinking dot roughly 5 miles ahead. Ray leaned closer, squinting. "What's that? A gas station? Or some kind of alien pit stop?" Stella didn't answer, though her glow brightened slightly. A signal, perhaps, that the destination was important. "Well, whatever it is, it's better than waiting for Beetlejuice to keel over," Ray said, gripping the wheel. "Let's just hope it has snacks. I'm starving." As they approached the blinking dot, Ray's skepticism grew. The gas station appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a lone structure surrounded by dusty nothingness. A faded sign swung precariously in the wind, its lettering half erased by time. "Ray's Rocket Stop." "Okay," Ray said, squinting at the sign. "I'm going to pretend that's not my name up there, because if this turns into some Twilight Zone nonsense, I'm done." The station itself was a bizarre mix of retro Americana and sci-fi absurdity. Neon lights flickered erratically, casting an eerie glow over a row of old-school gas pumps. A vending machine leaned against the wall, its glass cracked, but somehow still humming faintly. Ray parked the car and cut the engine, exhaling as the rattling finally stopped. "All right, Stella, let's see what kind of weirdness we've stumbled into this time." Stella followed him out of the car, her gaze darting around the station. She seemed wary, her glow pulsing faintly as if scanning for potential threats. "Relax," Ray said, trying to inject some humor into the tension. "It's just a gas station. Worst-case scenario, the bathroom's out of order." Stella didn't seem reassured. The door to the station creaked ominously as Ray pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of motor oil and something sweeter, like burnt sugar. The shelves were lined with an eclectic mix of products, canned beans, outdated magazines, and was that a jar of glowing, wiggling worms? Okay, Ray said, inching closer to the jar. Not your average road trip snack. Unless you're into this sort of thing, Stella? Stella wrinkled her nose, a surprisingly human reaction. Ray grinned. Yeah, I didn't think so. A voice suddenly boomed from behind the counter. Welcome to Ray's rocket stop, where the prices are as low as a spaceship's cruising altitude. Ray jumped, nearly knocking over the jar of worms. Behind the counter stood a tall, lanky figure wearing a stained apron and a trucker hat. At first glance, they looked human, until Ray noticed the faint iridescent sheen on their skin and the extra set of arms tucked neatly behind their back. Hi, Ray said, trying to keep his voice steady. We, need gas, and maybe some snacks. The figure grinned, their teeth unnervingly sharp. You've come to the right place, my friend. I've got fuel for your ride and treats for your taste buds. Even got a special on universal translator chips, half price today. Ray blinked. Wait, translator chips? Like for languages? The attendant nodded, reaching under the counter to pull out a small, shiny device. Pop this in your ear, and you'll understand any language in the galaxy. Guaranteed. Ray turned to Stella, who was watching the interaction with wary interest. What do you think? Should we try it? Stella hesitated, then gave a cautious nod. All right, Ray said, taking the device. But if this thing gives me a migraine, I'm coming back for a refund. The attendant chuckled. No refunds, buddy. Galactic policy. With a resigned sigh, Ray placed the chip in his ear. There was a brief buzz, followed by a strange tingling sensation. He turned to Stella. Okay, say something. She hesitated, then spoke a single word, soft and melodic, like a song. To Ray's amazement, he understood it. Wait, did you just call me an idiot? Stella's glow pulsed faintly, and Ray was certain she was laughing. Great, Ray muttered. I get chased by aliens, almost run out of gas, and now I'm getting insulted in real time. This day just keeps getting better. The attendant snorted. You're a funny one, kid. Anything else you need? Maybe a map to the nearest wormhole? Ray shook his head, though he couldn't help but smile. Just the gas, thanks. And maybe a couple of those glowing worms. My alien friend here looks hungry. Stella shot him a glare, her glow intensifying. Relax, it's a joke, Ray said, raising his hands in mock surrender. The attendant filled up Beetlejuice's tank with something that looked suspiciously like liquid starlight, and Ray paid with a handful of crumpled bills and an old guitar pick he found in his pocket. As they pulled back onto the highway, Ray felt a strange sense of optimism. For the first time in what felt like forever, things were looking up, at least until the radio crackled again, the haunting melody returning with a vengeance. Ray groaned. I take it back. Things are not looking up. Stella's glow dimmed as she stared out the window, her expression unreadable. Well, Ray said, gripping the wheel, whatever happens next, at least we've got a full tank, and a translator chip, and, the vague promise of snacks. Stella didn't laugh, but her glow softened just enough to suggest she appreciated the effort. The desert stretched on like an infinite canvas, its sandy hues occasionally interrupted by clusters of jagged rocks and stubborn shrubs. Ray's mind wandered as Beetlejuice chugged along, its engine making a noise that sounded like a blend of a death rattle and a disgruntled walrus. So, he began, glancing at Stella, are we going to talk about that little melody that keeps popping up on the radio? Or are we just ignoring it like I ignore overdue bills? Stella didn't answer immediately. Instead, she fiddled with her rectangular device, her glow shifting between soft blue and sharp green. Finally, she pointed to the radio, which was still spitting static between bursts of the haunting alien tune. Let me guess, Ray said, trying to fill the silence. It's an intergalactic version of We're Coming to Get You. Real comforting, by the way. Stella turned her head sharply, her glowing eyes narrowing. She tapped her device a few times, and a series of symbols appeared on the screen, accompanied by a faint rhythmic hum. Ray frowned. Okay, I'm gonna need the SparkNotes version of this one, unless you're telling me that's your people's idea of a mixtape. Stella sighed, a very human expression of exasperation, and gestured for him to hand over the translator chip. What? You're gonna update this thing? Add a deluxe package with more sarcasm detection? Ray quipped, even as he passed her the chip. Stella ignored his jab, slotting the chip into a small port on her device. The screen flashed, and the hum grew louder, evolving into a series of sharp mechanical chirps. A moment later the chip beeped, and Stella handed it back to him. Ray hesitated before placing it back in his ear. If this thing starts speaking in riddles, I'm out. As soon as the chip clicked into place, Stella spoke, her voice clear but layered with an ethereal resonance. The signal you hear, she said, her tone cautious, is a beacon. A tracker. Ray blinked, caught off guard by the sudden clarity of her words. Wait, you're saying they're tracking us through the radio? Stella nodded. It's more complicated. The beacon is encoded with patterns, algorithms. It's searching for a specific frequency. Ray frowned. And let me guess, the car's engine is giving off the exact frequency they need? Stella hesitated, then nodded again. Of course it is, Ray said, throwing his hands up, because why wouldn't my beloved Beetlejuice double as an alien homing beacon? This is why I should have just bought a bicycle. Stella tilted her head, clearly not understanding the joke. Ray sighed. Okay, fine. So how do we stop it? Or are we just doomed to be space breadcrumbs for these guys? Stella's glow brightened slightly. I can jam the signal, but it won't last long. They'll recalibrate. Great, Ray muttered. Temporary fixes, my favorite kind. Stella ignored his sarcasm and began tapping furiously on her device. The air around them seemed to thrum with energy, and the radio's static shifted, replaced by a faint, harmonic tone. There, Stella said, leaning back in her seat. That should buy us time. Ray raised an eyebrow. Define time. Like, enough to stop for burgers, or just long enough for me to regret not stopping for burgers? Stella's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Long enough to find a solution. Comforting, Ray said, his tone dripping with mock cheerfulness. As the car hummed along the highway, Ray decided to press his luck. So, Stella, since we're apparently in this mess together, maybe you can tell me a little more about you. Like, where you're from, or why those guys want to vaporize us. Stella hesitated, her glow dimming slightly. She stared out the window, her metallic hair catching the sunlight in a way that made her look almost otherworldly. Well, more so than usual. My home, she said softly, is gone. Ray's grip on the wheel tightened. Gone? As in, destroyed, Stella said, her voice heavy. By them. Ray swallowed hard. The guys chasing us? Stella nodded. They are harvesters. They seek energy, resources. My world was rich in both. They took everything. Ray let out a low whistle. Wow. And I thought the HOA back home was bad. Stella didn't laugh, but her glow softened slightly, a sign she at least appreciated the attempt at humor. And now they're after you because… What? You escaped with their favorite toy? Ray asked, gesturing toward her pouch. Stella hesitated, then opened the pouch just enough for Ray to catch a glimpse of what was inside. It was a small, crystalline orb, its surface swirling with vibrant colors that seemed to pulse in time with her glow. What is that? Ray asked, his voice hushed. The heart, Stella said simply. It is life, energy, knowledge, everything my people were. Ray stared at the orb, a sense of awe washing over him. And you're carrying it around like a set of car keys? Stella's expression turned serious. If they take it, they will consume what's left of my world. Use it to destroy others. No pressure or anything, Ray muttered, leaning back in his seat. The tension in the car was thick enough to cut with a knife, so Ray decided to lighten the mood. Okay, new rule. No more cryptic revelations while I'm driving. My brain can only handle so much before it short-circuits. Stella's glow flickered, and Ray could have sworn she was suppressing a laugh. See? He said, grinning. You're getting the hang of this humor thing. Stick with me, kid, and you'll be cracking jokes in no time. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, the road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, a blend of uncertainty and possibility. Where are we even going? Ray asked, breaking the silence. Stella glanced at her device, then pointed to a spot on the map, a blinking dot far from their current location. That's your plan? Ray asked. Drive until we get there and hope for the best? Stella nodded, her expression calm but resolute. Ray sighed. Well, it's not the worst plan I've heard, but if we're going to survive this, we're going to need more than just hope, and maybe some better snacks. Stella tilted her head, her glow flickering in a way that almost resembled amusement. As the car hummed along, Ray couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with his alien companion. For better or worse, they were in this together, and that was something at least. The sun had all but surrendered to the night, casting the landscape into a murky twilight. Beetlejuice trudged along, its engine making noises that sounded more desperate by the mile. Ray peered ahead, his squint revealing a jagged skyline that emerged from the desert haze. Is that a junkyard? He asked aloud, glancing at Stella. She nodded, her glowing device confirming what Ray's eyes struggled to believe. A sprawling scrapyard loomed ahead, littered with towers of rusting metal and discarded machinery. It was like a graveyard for things that had outlived their purpose, a patchwork of forgotten eras. Perfect, Ray muttered, steering Beetlejuice toward the entrance. Because nothing bad ever happens in creepy abandoned junkyards. As they approached, a flickering neon sign came into view. Hargon's Universal Emporium. Universal Emporium, huh? Ray said, pulling up to a makeshift gate. Sounds fancy. Maybe they've got a vending machine with alien Twinkies or something. Stella raised an eyebrow, a gesture that, in her glowing-eyed way, radiated skepticism. Ray shut off the car and Beetlejuice let out a final wheezy sigh. Stay here, he said. I'll scope it out. If I scream, well, just assume I was right about this being a bad idea. As he approached the gate, it groaned open on its own, revealing a maze of rusting metal and blinking lights. The air smelled faintly of ozone, with a hint of burnt oil. Hello? Ray called, his voice echoing against the metallic labyrinth. Anyone home? Or is this one of those abandoned but totally not abandoned setups? A shuffling noise answered him, followed by a deep, gravelly voice. You looking to buy or sell? Ray turned to see a towering figure step out from behind a pile of twisted girders. The creature resembled a humanoid turtle, if turtles had 6 limbs and wore tool belts. Its leathery skin gleamed under the flickering neon, and its beady eyes narrowed at Ray. Neither, Ray said. I'm more in the desperately need help category. The creature snorted. Name's Hargon. This is my patch. If you're not buying or selling, you're wasting my time. Okay, Ray said, raising his hands. Let's not get hasty. I've got a car that's one pothole away from falling apart, and an alien friend who... He stopped himself, realizing he might have said too much. Alien, huh? Hargon said, his eyes gleaming. That's interesting. Real interesting. Not that kind of alien, Ray backpedaled. Just, a regular tourist, totally not carrying anything valuable or wanted by intergalactic bounty hunters. Hargon's gaze lingered on Ray for a moment before he shrugged. Whatever. Follow me. The junkyard seemed to go on forever, a labyrinth of scrap and salvage that towered over them. Ray trailed behind Hargon, occasionally stopping to examine a particularly odd piece of machinery. One pile held what looked like the skeletal remains of a spaceship, its hull charred and riddled with holes. "Hey, Hargan," Ray said, pointing at the wreckage. "You ever think about fixing one of these up? You know, for fun?" Hargan let out a low, rumbling laugh. "Fun? Fixing junk is work, not fun. Besides, nobody in their right mind flies those old rust buckets anymore." "Right," Ray muttered. "Nobody in their right mind. Got it." They eventually reached a ramshackle workshop cobbled together from spare parts and glowing panels. Inside, the walls were lined with tools and gadgets, many of which Ray couldn't begin to name. "All right," Hargan said, turning to Ray. "What do you need?" Ray hesitated. "Well, for starters, my car needs a tune-up, and, maybe something to block alien tracking signals?" Hargan raised a brow ridge. "You're in trouble, aren't you?" "Trouble's an understatement," Ray said, leaning against a workbench. "Let's just say my current situation makes a soap opera look like a bedtime story." Hargan chuckled, pulling out a strange, glowing tool that looked like a cross between a wrench and a lightsaber. "I might have something for the tracking problem, but it's gonna cost you." Ray sighed. "Of course it is. Do you take credit cards? Or is this a trade your soul kind of deal?" Hargan grinned, his sharp teeth glinting. "Depends on the soul." "Figures," Ray muttered. While Hargan tinkered with a device that emitted a low-frequency hum, Ray returned to the car to check on Stella. She was leaning against Beetlejuice, her glow dim but steady. "Good news," Ray said. "Our new turtle friend might have a way to block the signal. Bad news, he's probably going to charge us an arm and a leg, maybe 2 legs. Stella didn't react, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Ray followed her line of sight and saw nothing but the endless desert. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice softening. Stella hesitated before speaking. "They're close." Ray felt a chill run down his spine. "How close?" Stella didn't answer, but the urgency in her glowing eyes said enough. Ray turned back to Hargan's workshop, shouting, "Hey, Hargan! You better make that signal blocker quick, because we've got company." The towering turtle emerged, holding a sleek, disc-shaped device. "Relax," he said. "This baby will scramble any tracker within a 100-mile radius." "Great," Ray said, grabbing the device. "How does it work?" "You stick it to your car and hope for the best," Hargan said with a shrug. Ray frowned. "That's reassuring." As he affixed the device to Beetlejuice's roof, the air around them seemed to vibrate, a faint hum growing louder, until it suddenly stopped. "There," Hargan said. "Tracker's offline. For now." Ray sighed in relief, but Stella remained tense, her glow flickering nervously. "What's wrong now?" Ray asked. "They're still coming," she said quietly. "They don't need the tracker anymore." Ray's heart sank. "Well, that's just peachy." Hargan crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "Sounds like you've got bigger problems than I can fix." "Tell me something I don't know," Ray muttered, climbing into the driver's seat. "Come on, Stella. Let's get out of here before this day gets any worse." As Beetlejuice roared to life, well, more like sputtered to life, they sped off into the night, leaving the junkyard and its gruff proprietor behind. In the distance, a faint glow appeared on the horizon, growing brighter with every passing moment. "They're here," Stella said, her voice barely a whisper. Ray gripped the wheel tighter, his mind racing. "Well, if they want to fight, they're going to have to catch us first." The open road stretched ahead, a ribbon of uncertainty in a universe filled with danger. But for the first time, Ray felt a flicker of determination. Whatever came next, he wasn't going down without a fight. And he sure as hell wasn't letting them take Stella. The night sky lit up behind them like a malfunctioning fireworks display, streaks of alien light tearing across the darkness. Beetlejuice rattled as Ray pushed the engine far beyond what it was ever designed for, the car lurching and sputtering but somehow holding together. "Come on, girl," Ray muttered, patting the dashboard. "You've got one last miracle in you, right? Don't let me down now." Stella sat rigid in the passenger seat, her glow shifting erratically as her focus darted between the rearview mirror and the swirling alien device in her lap. The orb pulsed, faint at first, but growing brighter with every beat, as though responding to the chaos behind them. "They're gaining," Stella said, her voice low but steady. "Yeah, I noticed," Ray shot back, swerving to avoid a crater in the cracked road. "You got any genius alien tricks left? Or is it just me, Beetlejuice, and sheer dumb luck from here?" Stella didn't answer immediately, her glowing eyes locked on the orb. She whispered something in her own language, a string of soft, melodic syllables, and the device responded with a sharp, crystalline hum. "That better be the alien equivalent of a cheat code," Ray muttered, tightening his grip on the wheel. "It's a signal," Stella said, her glow stabilizing. "A call for aid." Ray raised an eyebrow. "Aid? From who? Because unless you've got a fleet of space knights hiding around here, I don't think anyone's RSVPing to this party." Stella's expression didn't change, but her calm tone betrayed no doubt. "Someone will hear it." "Great," Ray said. "Let's hope they show up before we're vaporized." The glow on the horizon grew brighter, and soon the alien ships came into view. 3 sleek, angular crafts zipped through the air, their lights cutting through the darkness like blades. They moved with a precision that made Ray's hands sweat just watching them. One ship fired a blast, the energy beam striking the ground mere feet from Beetlejuice. The car swerved violently, and Ray let out a stream of curses. "Okay, that's it," he shouted. "You want to play dirty? Fine. Let's see how you handle some good old-fashioned human ingenuity." Stella tilted her head, clearly skeptical. "Don't look at me like that," Ray said, yanking the wheel hard. "I've got a plan, sort of." He veered off the road, heading straight for a rocky outcrop in the distance. The terrain was rough, the car bouncing and groaning with every jolt. But Ray didn't let up. "What are you doing?" Stella asked, her glow flickering with concern. "Improvising," Ray said through gritted teeth. The lead alien ship swooped lower, its engines roaring like a mechanical beast. Another energy blast narrowly missed them, sending a spray of dirt and debris into the air. "Almost there," Ray muttered, his eyes locked on the outcrop. As they reached the base of the rocky hill, Ray slammed on the brakes and yanked the handbrake, sending Beetlejuice into a screeching slide. The car skidded to a stop behind the outcrop, shielded from the ships above. "Okay, step 1, hide," Ray said, catching his breath. "Step 2, figure out step 2. Stella opened the door and stepped out, the orb in her hands glowing brighter than ever. The hum had grown into a low, resonant vibration that seemed to pulse through the air. "What's it doing?" Ray asked, climbing out after her. "It's ready," Stella said, holding the orb aloft. "Ready for what?" Ray began, but his question was cut off by a sudden burst of light. The orb released a shockwave of energy that spread outward in a shimmering dome, enveloping them and the surrounding area. The alien ships hovered just outside the barrier, their lights dimming as though the energy field was sapping their power. Ray stared in awe. "Well, I'll be damned. You really did have a cheat code." Stella didn't respond, her focus entirely on the orb. The barrier pulsed rhythmically, and the ships began to retreat, their sleek forms disappearing into the night. "They're leaving?" Ray asked, blinking in disbelief. "Just like that?" "They know they cannot breach the heart's field," Stella said, lowering the orb. "For now, they will retreat." "For now?" Ray echoed. "That's not exactly the kind of closure I was hoping for." Stella turned to him, her glowing eyes softening. "The harvesters will always seek. It is their nature. But for now, we are safe." Ray sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Well, I guess that's something. But what happens next? You can't just keep running forever." Stella hesitated, then placed the orb in his hands. It felt warm, its surface smooth and alive with energy. What are you doing?" Ray asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are resourceful," Stella said. "Clever. The heart will need a guardian, someone they will not suspect." "Whoa, whoa, whoa," Ray said, holding the orb out like it was a ticking time bomb. "I'm not exactly hero material, okay? I'm just a guy with a junky car and a bad sense of direction." Stella smiled, a small, faint smile, but a smile nonetheless. "You are more than that, Ray. You proved it." Ray opened his mouth to argue, but the words caught in his throat. For once, he couldn't find a joke or a quip to deflect the weight of the moment. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Stella stepped back, her form beginning to shimmer. "Wait," Ray said, panic creeping into his voice. "What's happening? Where are you going?" "The heart's signal will bring others," Stella said. "My people. They will come to guide you." "Guide me? What does that even mean?" Ray demanded. But before he could get an answer, Stella vanished in a burst of light, leaving only the orb in his hands. Ray stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where she had been. "Well," he said finally, "guess I'm the guardian of a magical alien orb now. That's normal." He climbed back into Beetlejuice, placing the orb carefully on the passenger seat. The car groaned as it started, but the engine sounded a little less tired this time, as if it too had found a second wind. As Ray drove off into the sunrise, he couldn't help but chuckle to himself. "Guardian of the Heart," he said aloud. "Sounds like a terrible B-movie. But hey, maybe I'll get a cool costume out of it." And with that, Ray and Beetlejuice disappeared down the highway, leaving behind the wreckage of the past and driving toward an uncertain but undeniably intriguing future.